Tuesday edition of lcpioneers.com Live, presented by PioStream. We welcome you in to talk with current student athletes, coaches, members from the Lewis and Clark College community, and different members of our alumni base on the air 4 days a week, Tuesday through Friday, 11:30 a.m. Pacific time. Available to watch live on Facebook Live and available to watch on demand on our YouTube page, youtube.com/lcpios. Appreciate making time for us on this Tuesday. I am Ryan Goff. I'm the play-by-play voice and director of athletic communications for Lewis and Clark, the Pioneers based out of Portland, Oregon, and members of the Northwest Conference competing with other institutions from throughout Northwest Oregon and the state of Washington, and a chance for our teams to compete nationally. Was member of the NCAA Division III ranks, over 430 institutions competing nationwide, as we have 19 intercollegiate athletics teams competing at Lewis and Clark, just 6 miles southwest, our campus located from downtown Portland, Oregon. Today is one of our shows where we get to go outside the realm of athletics and see how students and student athletes alike can get involved, as we'll talk to Associated Students of Lewis and Clark President Mikah Bertelmann, and excited to have a chance to find out all about ASLC, all the things that the organization does to help students at Lewis and Clark in ways that students can get involved. So maybe this is the first time you're hearing about ASLC. Maybe this is an opportunity for you to figure out how you can get involved. We'd love to share that with you, as we'll have Mikah in just a few moments from now. I invite you to get involved with the show. You can always comment with comments or questions in our Facebook Live panel, our chat down on the bottom if you want to. You can also email us, sports@lclark.edu, available to contact us if you have any future guests that you want to have on the show. Recommend those for us. We certainly always appreciate that. And then we are keeping you updated in terms of COVID-19 for athletics. Go to lcpioneers.com/COVID. All the latest information from the NCAA, Northwest Conference, as well as links to Lewis and Clark College's information available at lcpioneers.com/COVID. Of course, you can always reach us on Instagram and Twitter as well. We are available on both our handle LCPioneers on both of those platforms. One thing we do want to give a big shout out to is all of our Lewis and Clark Pios swimming families, as now a little bit of a new look in the Zentbauer Swimming Pavilion. As you can see, the video of new banners installed on the west wall, and a chance for us to kind of do phase one with the great support from our Lewis and Clark families, an opportunity to highlight some of the images in what is already a very awesome venue for collegiate swimming. And then, of course, as I mentioned, you can find us on YouTube. All of our past shows available to watch, youtube.com/lcpios. With that said, let's bring in our guest for today, president of the Associated Students of Lewis and Clark. We are pleased and proud to welcome in Mikah Bertelmann to the show. Mikah, appreciate taking the time to join us today. We have a chance to catch up with you and see all about ASLC. And this is what I love about this show, is a chance for us to introduce or further knowledge about organizations that support students on campus. So let's start with the umbrella, 1,000-foot view. What is ASLC?
Yeah, thanks for having me, Ryan. ASLC is the undergraduate student government, and our largest purview is to support students in a variety of ways. So that generally enacts itself in interacting with the administration one-on-one. And so myself and members of my team meet with the administration regularly to ensure that students' voices are heard on issues related to students, especially COVID, for this semester. And we also offer a number of financial resources for students, both student organization leaders as well as individual students, to do programs that they're interested in, access academic resources for research, and for bringing scholarships to campus. And we also offer a variety of COVID-related resources. As of March, in particular, our food resource pantry and our COVID testing fund. So it's a pretty large umbrella, but we do a bunch of different things, and all of it to support students.
Well, and I think that that's a good point. Is I'll ask you to further some of this COVID related information for those who might need it, but it makes me think, just as staff and faculty have been shifting, being able to manage unexpected things like a pandemic, and much like students have had to adjust to in the spring moving completely remote and into hybrid learning, and in the fall of 2020, I imagine student-run organizations like yourself have had to deal with some of the same things. What have you had to do? How stressful, how much of a learning experience has it been for you to have to navigate something like a pandemic?
Yeah, we when March 1st came, we transitioned entirely remote for our operations, including moving all of our committee meetings and our Senate meetings, which are generally available to the public, in J.R. Howard virtually. And so we've been using Zoom for a lot of our work. And most of our interactions with students are through my weekly email that comes out every Friday or through one-on-one conversations via computer. But we still try to maintain that same level of communication and outreach with the student body. And obviously, it's a lot more challenging through a computer screen, and trying to find ways to engage our constituents more directly without actually seeing them in person is a challenge. But it's definitely something that we're trying to figure out and trying to get used to, as I'm sure everyone else is also.
Now you're in your senior year and ASLC president. So when I ask the question, how can students get involved with ASLC? I assume officer positions are one of those ways. What enticed you into going into the leadership of ASLC?
So I have been part of ASLC since my freshman year. I've held a variety of different positions, including a senator and a committee member. And I think what really got to me was the ability to help students in conversations and be the representative for students in these really important spaces. And so in my role as the student organizations coordinator last year, I oversaw the allocation of all of the student fee money to our 100 plus student organizations. And through that process, I saw ways that we can better improve the overall organization of ASLC. And so my primary focus for this year in running was to redesign ASLC to make it a way that represents all of the students.
And you discuss lots of different opportunities through senator positions and those kind of things. Do students have to wait until they're a sophomore to get involved, or is this something that students can jump right into the first year that they're on campus?
Yeah, the very first year we have spaces available for students as senators, and we have 12 senators that are elected annually in the fall. We also encourage students to get involved in our committees, and that's actually where I first started as a committee member for our Community Service and Relations Committee. And through that, you get an experience with individual parts of ASLC and some of our really particular functions, whereas as a senator, you get a pretty broad view of the different parts that we work with.
Mikah Bertelmann, our guest on lcpioneers.com live, ASLC president at Lewis and Clark, from Hawaii and an international affairs major. And I'm curious, as you look at what you've learned as ASLC president and some of the other areas that you've been involved, as you mentioned, what are some ways that this has enhanced the experience from an educational standpoint for you personally?
Yeah, so two things come to mind. The first is the interactions that I get with people, and I think especially my role as president, my primary responsibility is to talk to people. And that's been a really valuable experience for me to get to hear the stories from my constituents as well as from the faculty and staff that I interact with on a regular basis. And the second thing is the experience that I get from leadership and networking, as well as the ability to get valuable professional experience through this role.
For students, if they decide not to necessarily get involved with ASLC directly, what kind of volunteer opportunities do students have that helps the student body as a whole?
Yeah, the first one that we have that we're really pushing for volunteers for is our resource pantry. So students, we ask them to, if they're free from Monday, Wednesday, or Friday, from 3 to 5, to sign up for a time to volunteer at our pantry. And through that role, they just interact with the students who need to come and get resources, and also are able to access the resources themselves. And thankfully, we were able to provide compensation for all of our volunteers through this role. So it's definitely a really good opportunity for people to learn more about ASLC and also to give back.
Expand on opportunities for volunteering or ways that this organization supports students. Maybe a story or two where you've really seen an impact that ASLC can have, whether it's through funding or just being there for your fellow student.
Yeah, I think the most impactful experience that I've had in ASLC was last year, last semester in March, when COVID first started hitting. There were a bunch of students who wanted to find ways to give back to their community and to provide support for their constituents and for their fellow students. And so we had an emergency committee created to respond to COVID on campus. And we had a bunch of student volunteers who weren't involved with ASLC previously, who were organization leaders or just regular students who weren't actively involved in other ways. And they gave their time and experience in helping us to think through issues that we didn't necessarily come up with as leaderships of ASLC. And so we were able to target very specific groups of students and provide resources for them, but also to get a broad view of ways that we can support students through COVID. And so I definitely encourage students that even if you don't want to get involved in a leadership position or regularly involved in a committee meeting, we definitely encourage you to continue to give your feedback. We have a number of ways to provide feedback, either anonymously or directly through our emails. And with that, we're able to provide more resources and support for students and to really address issues that students see that they'd like to be addressed.
Now, you mentioned COVID funding opportunities for a discretionary fund potentially for students who need help. What's the best way to access that as a student at Lewis and Clark?
So we have two ways that you can access that. The first one is going to be visiting our website, which is go.lclark.edu/ASLC. And on that page, we have a resources tab where you can access all of our resources. And in particular, our discretionary fund is listed there, as well as our COVID relief fund for students who need to cover their own cost of COVID testing. And the second way is to just send us an email at aslc@lclark.edu, and I can direct that to whatever committee member or chair is the most appropriate to access those resources.
You're watching lcpioneers.com live, presented by PioStream. We're on Tuesday through Friday, 11:30 a.m. Pacific time. You can find us on Facebook Live. Easiest way, just type in lcpioneers.com/live. All of our shows on demand at youtube.com/lcpios. Mikah Bertelmann is our guest, the ASLC president. And I'm curious about Pios for Pios. When I talk to you about that, what comes to mind? What is that program?
Yeah, so Pios for Pios is a student-run scholarship created by students for students. It was first started by ASLC in 2014, and since then we've been able to raise over $30,000 to support students. Generally, it's for students who have a change in financial situation over their last semester at Lewis and Clark, and it's able to cover that remaining fee so that they don't have to drop out of college or can continue their education despite financial hardships that they experience. And I've been really fortunate in my past roles to be the lead fundraising for that program. And over the last few years, we've done a really significant job at raising funds for that particular scholarship. But it's definitely a program that I'm really passionate about and that students definitely benefit from. And it's definitely a program that I can continue to encourage people to donate to if they are willing to donate to Lewis and Clark. And it's also definitely a really good way to get involved with ASLC.
Now, I imagine your longest lasting moment from Lewis and Clark will have been working for PioStream for a shortened time, filling in and doing the things that you did for us. No, Mikah was outstanding. But as you can imagine, ASLC presidents and all the other things that students at Lewis and Clark are required to do, I wasn't able to keep Mikah on my staff, which was super disappointing because Mikah was very good. But that said, you're an international affairs major. Tell me about why you chose to declare and some of the aspects of that major that you've really enjoyed as a student at Lewis and Clark.
Yeah, growing up in Hawaii, I was really fortunate to be able to travel to different parts prior to coming to Lewis and Clark, different parts of the world. And it really showed me the importance of traveling and getting to know other people and learning more about their cultures. So coming to Lewis and Clark, the international affairs major really spoke to me because it really helped me to develop an appreciation and understanding for the global community and also really influenced my decision to get into the foreign service in the future.
When you look at kind of what's ahead, then you're in your senior year, describe potential things that you'll be pursuing professionally. What is it that you want to do post LC?
Yeah, post LC, I'm hoping to go to grad school, hopefully in the East Coast, somewhere closer to DC. But if not, there's definitely a few schools in California that would fit in pretty nicely with my interest in the Asia Pacific region. And long term, I want to work for the Foreign Service, potentially being an ambassador at the long term.
I have to ask you, we discuss all the time on the show with our current student athletes and then alumni who have gone through being a student athlete at Lewis and Clark. Many times the fondest memories have to do with overseas study. And that's a program that you also got to do. Describe what overseas study was like for you.
Yeah, I went to Siena, Italy in the spring of 2019. So I was fortunate to be able to get that full semester abroad experience. And I think that was definitely one of the most amazing parts of LC in my experience at Lewis and Clark. I was staying with a host family, and that was probably the most memorable part of that program. Being able to talk to the family one-on-one and have dinner with them every night and breakfast in the morning and learn more about their interests. So I was fortunate to have a family who, for the most part, had a vineyard of their own in their backyard. And so we had some homemade wine for a lot of our meals and some homemade drinks, and just a really, really good experience and getting to learn more about the Italian culture at the same time.
That's so great because I've heard host family come up so often when I ask that question, and it sounds like you had a very similar experience. So look forward to the days when we can travel again, as you mentioned, as an IA major. I'm sure that that's in your future too. Once again, if anyone wants to get involved with ASLC or needs access to any of the resources ASLC provides, what's the best way to go about that?
Best way is always to reach out to us via email at aslc@lclark.edu, and we can connect you with whatever is most appropriate and matches your interest the best.
Mikah Bertelmann, ASLC president, thanks so much for taking some time to join us today on lcpioneers.com live.
Definitely. Thank you.
That was a lot of fun. Day. Yeah, you too. Thank you. A lot of fun. I appreciate Mikah joining us today. And that's one of my favorite aspects of this show. I sometimes feel a little bit like a broken record, but the reality is this has been one of the best things to come out of a situation that I wish had never happened. The pandemic had required us to figure out ways that we can keep everyone connected. And one thing that's come out of the show is expanding that connection beyond just strictly athletics, because the one thing that's great about NCAA Division III and then the way that Lewis and Clark approaches that is the holistic student athlete, and the reality that everything that Pioneers do in their 4 years competing at Lewis and Clark, much of that entails the measure of success that they find doing things even outside of athletics as much as it is on how they compete too. And that goes back to that building champions mantra that, physical education and athletics director Mark Petrock talks about in the Building Champions program. You're creating champions, building champions in the classroom, competition, character, and community. And so having an opportunity to bring someone like Mikah on the show and find out more about ASLC, we've been able to do this with the Bates Center for Entrepreneurship and Leadership. We've been able to do this with Student Support Services and many other departments within the Lewis and Clark community. And I'm very thankful that Mikah took the time to join us. Just wish we would have been able to keep him on the Pio Stream worker role a little bit longer, because again, Mikah was so outstanding with all the work that he did for us. So certainly appreciative of that. First show of 3 live this week. We do have to take another re-air tomorrow, as we have a very important athletic department staff meeting that we're working on during the show's window. So we will be re-air tomorrow. I believe Caitlin Gallagher, our guest from a couple weeks ago from women's soccer, a senior for the Pioneers, will join us in our re-air show tomorrow at 11:30 a.m. Pacific time. And then we'll have our second opportunity to visit with softball head coach Shauna Cyrus. And then after that, we'll talk to Lewis and Clark swimming senior Margot Chiriath as we showed those pictures of the way the pool looks and get a feeling for how things are going for fall 2020 semester from both Shauna and Margot coming up on Thursday and Friday. So until then, I'm Ryan Goff. Thanks so much for having fun with us again on this edition of lcpioneers.com live. You can find us Tuesday through Friday, 11:30 a.m. Pacific time. Many links available on lcpioneers.com, but you can go /live at the end of that and find us directly via Facebook Live. All of our shows available to watch on demand. Go to lcpioneers.com and click on the fan zone. lcpioneers.com live is there, and you can see all of our past shows, or visit us on YouTube, youtube.com/lcpios. So we'll see you again soon for more of the show. Thanks so much. Big thanks again to Mikah for joining us as well. And we'll see you again soon for more lcpioneers.com live, presented by PioStream. Goodbye, everybody.
We invite you to join us.
It's time to explore Lewis and Clark.
I think everyone should take intro to chemistry because the chemistry department here is phenomenal. Everyone I've known has had a good experience with everyone in that department, so I think it's a worthwhile course to take.
What is one class that everyone should take at Lewis and Clark? I really enjoyed education in a complex world. You kind of get to discuss all the issues that exist within education today, and you get to kind of explore that by going to classrooms firsthand and volunteering with children, which I thought was a really wonderful experience.
One class that everybody should take at Lewis and Clark is anything with Kundai Chirindo. I think he definitely changed how I thought about rhetoric and media studies and just education in general.
For me, it was international affairs, just intro to international affairs, because I think it really gives a good perspective on important issues around the world.